I find the debate over how long a video game should be to be kind of irrelevant. I get it that you have to factor in value for money and getting the right amount of content for the cash you relinquish, but video games have thrived over the years because of the amount of variance they've had. This has become very important these days because now you've got casual mobile games that can occupy you for minutes at a time, or gigantic big budget monsters designed for longer investment. Or at least, that's how it should work. You'd imagine that you'd only notice a game's lack of length if what you're playing has been a load of fun, but I think an optimistic part of me hopes that a bad game will have enough time to turn it around in the end, rather than take the form of a few hours of crap at the cost of quite a lot of money. I'd also say that it's a bit different to a game being too long, since that's got more to do with bad pacing than anything else. I'd love to play a game that could be considered too fast. That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. So that just leads me to ask, how short is too short? And it depends almost entirely on what kind of game it is. The most common theme I see with games that are too short is that overall, there's a feeling of unfulfillment based on their length. And yes, I realise that this video is going to turn into a dick joke, but that doesn't mean that I'm wrong, it just means that it's funny. There's more than one reason why we don't see true innovation all that often. Naturally, coming up with an idea that uproots conventions for fun isn't exactly the easiest task in the world, and that's before we factor in whether or not the new ideas are worth the risk. Plus, if you really want to be innovative, you have to maintain that kind of pace over the course of the game and constantly surprise the player with all sorts of new things. Super Mario Odyssey does this by continuing to put the player in situations where Mario's hat can be thrown on different objects to achieve a variable number of effects and outcomes, giving the game the power to surprise at every turn. Mirror's Edge didn't do this, which explains an awful lot. I didn't really like Mirror's Edge when it first came out because the idea of a first-person 3D platformer made my brain and my stomach very nervous, but you play it and you come to understand what the game's about, and it doesn't inflict motion sickness on you, which is pretty handy. But can it really keep impressing the player over the course of a typically lengthed campaign? It's a trick question. After all, there's only so many ways you can jump around a city. In a way, Mirror's Edge is very nicely paced since you learn the basics, jump around levels in creative ways, maybe do some shooting for some variety, and then reach the end inside 6 hours or so, which is a decent length for the kind of game it is, but that doesn't stop it from feeling short. It's kinda hard to explain, but I remember there being a point in the final third of the game when I could feel that it was reaching a conclusion, but it wasn't that long ago that we were still learning how to play the damn thing. It's like EA and DICE, yeah, those guys, knew that the game could only be so long with these mechanics, but were still unwilling to experiment further to help make the game longer. I think that's really what's missing from Mirror's Edge, a desire to experiment even more so than what they've already done and expand beyond an extended tech demo. That's kind of what the sequel did, but then they ruined other parts like the story and the combat, which just means that it's nicely set up for the trilogy to be completed with the best of both games. And probably lots of microtransactions these days. You can't have it all your own way. There are few developers out there capable of making so many different video games to such a high level of quality as Platinum Games. I was looking at their games library shortly after they announced they were making Bayonetta into a trilogy, and while not all of these are incredible games, there's a huge amount of variety here that demonstrates a great understanding of how to get the most out of each of these genres. Between Metal Gear Rising, both Bayonettas, Mad World, and Nier Automata, you get the sense that Platinum Games really know how to make an effective hack-and-slash game, but the lesser-known Vanquish is a third-person shooter, but with quite a big difference. Which is, in of itself, a miracle in a genre that has seen so much stagnation over the years. Vanquish cleverly uses the idea of a cover-based shooter as its foundation for some gooey Platinum Games madness, where you can happily pop out from behind cover and shoot some dudes like Gears of War, or you can do none of that. Being able to rocket slide along the ground and slow down time at your leisure turns Vanquish into an incredibly stylish game that kind of makes a mockery of the entire third-person shooter genre. You feel a little less like a generic action hero and more on the same level as someone like Deadpool, and you're right, that does sound and look like an ungodly amount of fun. It's just a shame then that Platinum didn't think to include any multiplayer, because that is something I would have wanted to see in action, and also because the campaign is a sweet but painfully short slip and slide through Russian robots of all shapes and sizes that ends all too soon. You definitely get the sense once you beat Vanquish that the game could have easily gone on for another 5 hours without breaking stride, developing and expanding ideas, and it's such a shame that they didn't. Especially since it really didn't sell well and any hope for an expansion or a sequel died fairly briskly. But hey, it got a PC port this year with an uncapped frame rate and just, I have never been this moist before. Why would you play anything else? Every single era in the history of video games has been filled with people and developers claiming they have what it takes to revolutionize the way in which video games will be played in the future. Most of the time, it's Nintendo with their weird motion controls, but sometimes it moves in a slightly different direction. Even if that direction is kinda shit. I have fond memories of the build-up to the release of The Order 1886. I say fond, but really I was deriving pleasure from watching interviews with the key people behind the game trying to explain how exactly The Order 1886 was gonna take gaming to the next level. The first trailer came out a few months before the PS4 was released, and there was a general consensus that The Order 1886 was gonna be the great console seller that Sony were looking for. The first real sign of next-gen gaming that would wow people into climbing aboard the PS4 train over, say, the Xbox One. And honestly, I could be convinced. Certainly, when they started showing gameplay, it became evident that The Order 1886 was gonna be one of the best looking games ever made, but that doesn't mean anything though. Which is why those interviews were so entertaining to listen to, because shortly before the game came out, it was revealed that A, The Order 1886 is a full-price single-player game with a short, unfulfilling campaign, and that B, The Order 1886 isn't very good. The people at Ready at Dawn spent so long bigging this game up off of its premise and what it's going to do for the future of video games that they forgot to make The Order 1886 into much more than a technical exercise. The short campaign especially was the subject of much debate, since it set a bad precedent for all other AAA titles who might feel they can get away with this level of style over substance and being able to charge full price for the privilege of playing through 5 hours of a mediocre shooter. Who knows, maybe if you extend out the campaign a bit more, you might have some more space to explore unique ideas and maybe shift the focus back towards an enjoyable gaming experience rather than, oh, it looks pretty! Honestly, you do so much lethargic walking in this game that you'll probably find a run button would knock it down to a 3-hour campaign. I too play video games to walk slowly around a room because escapism is for pussies. After a while, you come to accept that certain games within certain genres are going to provide you with a certain amount of video game to play. For example, you buy an RPG knowing that you'll be able to sink dozens of hours into it before reaching the end, but on the flip side, the average length of time you spend playing a platformer, or as Vanquish showed, the campaign part of a typical shooty action game, is considerably smaller. But that's important because you can then tailor your purchases and by proxy your collection of games to how much time you're willing to put towards each of them. Unless you're like me and you buy games because people said they were good and then just never play them. One day, my friend. Sonic games have been fairly consistent with their length over the years on account of being platformers that are rarely artificially extended through hardware limitations or developer incompetence, so I guess he's got that going for him these days. You wouldn't want to take that away from him. It's all he's got. In a way, that's something that Mario and Sonic have had in common for a very long time. Of course, there's a divergence when we make the jump into 3D, but even so, both Mario and Sonic have maintained a retro-like feel to their games despite the massive variance between them. Sonic Forces may have gone slightly too far though, in more than one area. I love how there isn't much of a middle ground with this game. Whether it's a self-fulfilling prophecy with Sonic games at this stage that people overreact to a series of small design problems, or if Sonic Forces is a genuinely terrible video game, it luckily doesn't matter so much when talking about how damn short it is. The game boasts 40 levels with a small amount of replay value, but you can still smash through them all in under 4 hours since each level in turn barely has enough time to get going before you trip over the finish line. I imagine that even for people who like this game, which is a group I don't really consider myself a part of, you'd have to be disappointed that the first 3D Sonic game in 4 years is over and done with inside a few hours. It's even more confusing considering that Sonic Forces has a mix of levels between modern Sonic, your customized avatar, and classic Sonic for some reason. And you'd think that between them you'd have enough there to create a fairly lengthy game, but apparently not. We've come a long way since the multiple different campaigns of Sonic Adventure. I almost missed the fishing. How have you done that? I debated with myself for a decent amount of time over whether or not I should put Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes on here somewhere, since it is a video game that you pay a fair sum of money to play that will keep you occupied for, I'd say, about an hour and a half. For a while back in 2014, it was the only thing that people were talking about, specifically if Konami and Hideo Kojima should be allowed to sell a playable demo for most of the price of a full game, and no, they shouldn't. But for what it is, which is a separate prologue to the Phantom Pain, I think it works. Just so long as you're not spending stupid money on it, you'll be fine. Hey, if it's a choice between Ground Zeroes and the new Bugsy game and you still don't know what to do, I can't help you there. I don't think I've ever anticipated a game in the same way as I did for Bugsy the Woolies Strike Back. It's not like the predictable annual releases of the usual cash cows that you meet with a general feeling of disdain. I don't think you can approach the news of the new Bugsy game with anything other than confusion and a little bit of disgust. Because you know that the decision to make this game wasn't made out of anything other than self-deprecating humor, which incidentally is the angle that the official Bugsy Twitter account has gone with since it was announced. At some point, it stops being funny and starts becoming very sad. But then you find out how short Bugsy the Woolies Strike Back is, and then it becomes mildly offensive. You might think that spending as little time with a bare-bones 2D platformer with unfulfilling gameplay and Bugsy chirping away in the background might seem like a good trade, but those psychopaths at the somehow still functional Accolade wanted you to pay $30 for this privilege. I can understand that Bugsy's reintroduction into the market after more than 20 years of warranted silence would be a smaller scale project than his other games, but you can't possibly expect people to pay that amount of money for something so short. There are 14 levels in this game, none of them are satisfying to play through, and they'll only set you back little over an hour's worth of your own time. For the record, that is shorter than every other game in his library. If the goal was to convince people that Bugsy had something to offer the world, ironically or otherwise, you might have failed. Just a little bit. This is RabbidLuigi, and the inspiration behind Bugsy the Woolies Strike Back concerns me because companies like Accolade feel like they can use bad publicity to do their work for them, and it doesn't matter that the game isn't very long or very good because people will buy it anyway just to find out for themselves. I'm worried that this trend might spread. You know, artistic integrity? What the fuck kind of world do you live in, son? Have you got an idea that you'd like me to turn into a countdown? Let me know in a comment down below, and make sure you check out my Twitter where I'll be turning the best submissions into a poll where you can then decide the best topic. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.